Hello, welcome to another class. In this class, we are going to look at the next topic that is discussed by Wordsworth in his Preface. Now, in this topic, in this discussion, Wordsworth first of all tells us something about the characteristics of the poems that are there in the volume. Now he mainly tells us about two characteristics. The first characteristic is each poem carries a purpose along with it. Now Wordsworth says each poem has a purpose. So Wordsworth is not someone who argues art for art's sake. So for Wordsworth, poetry has a social function to carry out. So each poem has a purpose behind it. Number two, the second characteristic is the feelings expressed in the poems are more important than actions or situations. So in this poem, you will find actions, situations and feelings. Of all the three, which is the most important? Wordsworth would say feelings. I remember romantic poets gave a lot of importance to feelings. For them, feelings were everything. They did not pay much attention to the intellect or the brain. So Wordsworth accordingly says, feelings expressed in the poems are more important than actions or situations. He says each poem in the volume carries a purpose. It's a habit of meditation of the poet that whenever he was very much excited by feelings to write a poem, it always carried a purpose along with it. So whenever he wanted to write a poem, he did not do it in a very casual manner. He thought about why I should write this poem. What is the purpose behind writing this poem? So only when he was very clear about the purpose, he took his pen and started to pen the lines. And he also makes it very clear. Here is the definition of good poetry. He says all good poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. The spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Earlier, Wordsworth told us it is emotions recollected in tranquility. So these two definitions are slightly conflicting. One is not spontaneous. You have an experience and then you go back, you remember, think about that experience, and then your feelings are recollected and then you write the poem. Here Wordsworth says, poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. By which he meant poetry is expressing oneself and not imitating the classical authors. So this is where Wordsworth differs, says goodbye to the neoclassical tradition of poetry. What is the neoclassical tradition of poetry? It was imitating the classical authors. Mimesis, what Aristotle called mimesis, the Greek word, which meant imitation. So neoclassical poetry was imitating, just like a parrot, what the classical poet had written or their rules. But romantic poetry is completely liberated. It is completely free. Remember, the watchword of French Revolution, liberty. So liberty is coming into poem. The poets are expressing their freedom. They are saying, no, we are not going to write poetry according to certain rules laid down by certain classical authors. We will redefine poetry. We will write poetry according to our rules, or we will build our own rules. So we are declaring our freedom. So this is the great revolutionary attitude that poets declared their freedom. So poetry is expressing oneself and not imitating the classical authors. And he says it is not the variety of subjects that produce good poetry, but organic sensibility, that is feeling, coupled with deep and long thought. So here we will find Wordsworth, even though he said the feeling is the most important, he says feeling must be coupled with the thought. So just because he says feeling is more important, it doesn't mean it is just a break-free run of feelings only and no thought or intellect. No, intellect or thoughts are also there. They must be properly balanced. They must be properly combined. And he makes his points very clear. Feelings are modified by thoughts, and thoughts are past feelings. So actually, if we think about the thoughts, what are thoughts? Thoughts are actually our past feelings. Again, we come back to feelings. So thought is not something completely different from feelings. Our thoughts today are or were our feelings yesterday. Yesterday we had certain feelings, and those feelings frozen into thoughts, and those are the thoughts that we have today. So in the ultimate analysis, in the final analysis, we can find that thoughts are also feelings. So he says feelings must be combined with the thoughts, and the feelings are modified by thoughts, and thoughts are past feelings. So one is reminded of our Professor Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam's famous quotation, thoughts come from dreams and actions come from thoughts. So from dreams come thoughts, and from thoughts actions. So here Wordsworth says thoughts come from feelings. APJ Abdul Kalam said thoughts come from dreams. So here Wordsworth says thoughts come from feelings. That's the only difference. Then after this he continues his discussion with a criticism of current trend in literature. Just like when we were studying Sir Philip Sidney's Apology for Poetry, we found Sidney reviewing contemporary Elizabethan literature. So here Wordsworth is also reviewing contemporary literature, maybe following in the footsteps of Sidney. Now Wordsworth says human mind is capable of being excited without gross and violent stimulus. Now it is a wrong idea that some writers have. In order to stimulate human minds, you have to supply it with sensational emotions and feelings, which we find in the horror novels or the sensational novels. The Wordsworth believes that human mind can be excited even without sensationalism, even without horror. It is the feigned perception of beauty that elevates a poet. Now what makes a good poet? A good poet is not one who finds pleasure in putting so many sensational things in his poetry, but a good poet is one who perceives subtle beauty in nature and communicates that beauty through his poetry, and not one who is interested in the gross things of life. He notices that people are losing the ability to perceive this subtle beauty. So it's very sad to observe that nowadays people don't have that sensitivity to observe these subtle things in life. They are more focused on the gross things of life. Because why has this happened? Because the mind has become dull and lazy. Because we have become very lazy and our mind has become very lazy. When we see something, we are not ready to go deep into it, because to go deep into it will require some effort, the effort of our mind, but we are not ready to undertake any such hard work. So we are lazy people. So when we read a fine poem, it will be intellectually challenging. So it may require us to think too much, to ponder too much, to go deeper and deeper into the poem. But we are not ready to do all these things. Why? Because we are lazy. So we don't find such poems very interesting. But if we get a horror novel or if we get a very sensational novel, then we will be very excited by reading it. So this is the reason why people are running after such a sensational works. So he says, so ancient authors like Shakespeare and Milton have become unpopular nowadays. People don't read any Shakespeare or any Milton. Why? Because to read and enjoy Milton or Shakespeare, you require a tremendous mind. You require some hard work. Your mind has to work. But the minds of people today are not ready to work. Instead, stupid tragedies and frantic novels that require only a gross sensibility become very popular. So Wordsworth makes a distinction between gross sensibility and fine sensibility. To read and enjoy Shakespeare and Milton, you need fine sensibility. And to have fine sensibility, you have to do hard work. Your mind has to work hard. But people who read detective novels or sensational novels or horror novels, they have only a gross sensibility. And gross sensibility does not require much intellectual work. So that is why they are running after stupid tragedies and frantic novels. The most effective of these causes are the great national events which are daily taking place, and the increasing accumulation of men in cities where the uniformity of their occupations produces a craving for extraordinary incident, which the rapid communication of intelligence hourly gratifies. So why has this happened? Why have people become very lazy? Wordsworth puts the blame on the urbanization. The current trend in mass migration to cities. So people migrate to cities. And what happens when they migrate to cities? They don't get any time. Time is very limited. They spend most of their time in factories and offices. So they don't get much time to read and enjoy, understand literature, just like the people living in the village. So this is the shortage of time that compels people to run after such sensational novels and horror novels, and to neglect great writers like Shakespeare or Milton. Now Wordsworth is very optimistic. He hopes that things will change. This trend will not continue forever. There will be a reversal of the trend. So that is this topic. We'll meet again in the next class when we will discuss the next topic in the essay.